It's becoming ever clearer to me with every passing week that this realm, this reality in which we find ourselves, is not created for our own benefit, and therefore is not the creation of a good, loving, benevolent creator, but rather all the evidence which is available to us and which is measurable, observable, and repeatable through our own experiences points to the very strong, I would say, conclusion that this realm is specifically designed for pain, fear, suffering, trauma, anxiety, and everything else that goes with it. We are here to generate pain, fear, suffering, anxiety for the benefit of whatever entity or forces created this realm. So we are here as food sources. People refer to it as lush energy, and the forces that control this realm get off on our suffering and actually need it in order for them to survive and thrive. That is a conclusion which anyone who is really paying attention to the evidence available to them must arrive at if they have no belief system to defend and no ulterior motive to prop up. So clearly going to exclude people who adhere to one or the other of the major orthodox world religions, whatever label you might want to put on it. If you're somebody of that persuasion and your first instinct when listening to videos of this nature is to denounce them on the basis that they're heretical or they're blasphemous or they go against whatever particular religious codebook you might happen to adhere to, then this is not going to be the video for you. This is not the channel for you. And there's no point in putting your comments down below, giving me some scripture or some passage to read or quoting some excerpt from whichever holy book you adhere to, because I've heard it all a million times. And these comments have already been posted a billion different places on the internet. Similarly, if you're someone of a more new age inspired love and light persuasion, and you're going to tell me that of course there's suffering in our lives, it's all part of the rich cocktail of experiences that we must go through for our souls to develop and grow and evolve. Then similarly, you're not going to be telling me anything I've not heard before, and you're going to be wasting your breath. I've considered those points of view, and they don't stack up, because the suffering and the pain and the trauma that we all experience in our lives far outweighs the joy and the happiness. There are moments of joy and happiness in our lives, and I feel that they're afforded to us and we're allowed to undergo them to give us just enough reason to hang on in there and not seek to exit through the back door so that we can continue to generate these states of pain and all the rest of it that whatever forces lie out of sight and control this realm rely upon. So these are the conclusions I've reached. And as I say, they are measurable. The suffering and the hardship continues in the lives of myself. I'm not claiming to suffer more than anyone else. I'm just pointing out that the hardships are stacking up for me in my own personal circumstances, and I'm not going to go into those because they are personal. But also so many people that I know, friends, family members, affiliates, people that message in every single day and outline their personal circumstances to me. People are suffering. And it seems to be the people who are doing the most to try and alleviate suffering and try and make this world a better place and try to stand in right action and try to oppose evil and darkness and tyranny and all the expressions of it, they seem to be the ones who are suffering the most. Meanwhile, the normies, the NPCs, or the just straight selfish shits who don't mind trampling all over everybody else and all they care about is themselves because they're stuck in that satanic, dark mindset, seem to do just fine. Why could that be? Well, it's because the rules of the game in this realm are weighted in the favor of those who don't give a shit about anyone else, go through life selfishly, just fulfilling their own ambitions and pleasures and desires and whims, and just don't give a thought about how that affects other living sentient beings. Indeed, those that actively seek to harm other living sentient beings, not just humans, but other life forms as well, seem to do just fine. I've noticed they seem to be the ones who get ahead and everything just works swimmingly for them. Meanwhile, it's the ones who try to be good who just continue to suffer. And these dynamics just become more and more obvious with every passing week. Don't know what it is times. There's something changing, it seems, overall consciousness, but it's becoming more apparent that this place is set up in that way. So if you're going to try and oppose, if you're going to try to do good in this world and possibly fix it, then you're going to discover that that's an exercise in futility because this place can't be fixed. It's been coded. You can think of it as a CGI style computer simulation. You can draw an analogy with a video game. It seems to have computer code into it out of sight, and that affects the way that physical reality is playing out, the way that our lives are manifesting. Because I'm now really starting to view it a kind of video game made up of computer code. And it's been specifically written by architect, put it into place, that pain, suffering, hardship is required. Those whose expressions and behaviors in life go towards cultivating these states get rewarded through getting ahead in life, and those who try and go against it get punished, made to suffer. If the world were completely dark and completely horrific, then many of us, sure, would be looking for a quick exit out of here, and the body count would be even higher. I'm actually finding that it's making me more compassionate and more empathetic, more caring towards others and to all living sentient beings. But I think what's happening is I'm recognizing that we're all in this together. We're all suffering in this realm together. And that's all living sentient beings. So I recognize the kinship that I have with everyone else, not the psychopathic, satanic, so-called elite ruling class, because they're the ones who are specifically, knowingly, deliberately doing the bidding of this evil force, if you want to call it that, by deliberately, systematically making this world a worse place and getting rewarded for it, it would seem, in very great measure. Apart from them, I'm finding common ground and common compassion with everyone else and every other living thing. So I think that's just part of this process if you allow yourself to go all the way with it and you allow yourself to be led to where these new discoveries take you. So that's something I'm finding. Also, I mentioned earlier that all the evidence suggests that this is a place that's been deliberately set up, coded, you might say, against our best interests. But that doesn't mean that we should do nothing to try and make it a better place. Trying to fix this realm is also an exercise in futility. It cannot be fixed because it's not being set up to be fixed. What you can do is try and navigate your way through it, recognizing that you're a part of it, whether you want to be or not, whatever method you came in by. Navigate your way through it as best you can, whilst causing as little suffering to others as you can. That seems to me to be our best chance and to constitute our best intentions. To have the most valuable experience as we work our way through this place for the time that we need to be here. Through seeking to reduce suffering, recognizing that we're never going to fix it. That's why nothing ever seems to get any better. Don't know if you've noticed. Doesn't matter which political system might come in a particular region. Doesn't matter how much protest and pushback occurs to tyranny whenever it pops up in various parts of the world. And I'll address that a bit further in a moment. And most importantly, it doesn't seem to matter how much prayer is offered up to whichever god or spiritual entity somebody might believe in. This is another point which came up in my chat with Howdy. How many prayers do people think have been offered up over the course of human history? It's going to be trillions upon trillions upon trillions upon trillions, whatever kind of figure we're looking at, however many zeros appear at the end of it. And all these prayers would have been asking for improved situations in the world. For peace, for joy, for happiness, for abundance. People would have been asking for wars and conflict and pain and suffering to end. People would have been praying for their loved ones, asking for improved situations. They might have a family member that's dying of cancer, for example, and they would have been asking for the cancer to go away and for that person to recover. How many times do you think that individual that's been prayed for died anyway and succumbed to that disease anyway? So the prayers were all in vain, weren't they? They were pointless. Why? Because nobody's listening. Nothing is listening. Nothing that's going to make any kind of a difference. Nothing that cares about what you think and what you want anyway. So it's exercises in futility. However, having said that, I'm certainly not advocating that people become selfish shits and do whatever they want, adopt a satanic mindset, trample all over other people, don't give a shit what kind of impact their behaviors might have on other living sentient beings and on this place itself. I'm certainly not advocating that. All that's going to do is increase the suffering, increase the dense negative energy, and increase the food source that these entities, these forces, whatever they may be, seem to feed off. Falling for the mind control of religion and whatever promises various political systems might make, and whatever promises various YouTube pundits and online armchair warriors might make, it's clear that we must have been tricked, conned, duped into incarnating into this reality. Because if the terms and conditions had been made clear to us on a soul spirit level before we came in, honestly, really, which of us would have said, yeah, I'm up for undergoing a life full of hardship and suffering and pain and turmoil. I'm up for witnessing all these horrors. I'm up for being a part of that. Why would I want to stay here in the spirit realm when I could go down there and experience all that stuff? Again, people will say that it's all part of the lessons that our souls yearn to learn so that they can take them back to source with them. And again, my response to that would be, why then is this place so unfairly weighted in the favor of suffering, hardship, and all the rest of it, and against joy, happiness, and abundance? No, we were tricked. Whatever method was used, none of us would have voluntarily agreed to have come in here to undergo all this stuff. It's the same reason why the so-called elites, the psychopaths, the sick ones, feel the need to pre-announce their dastardly plans for us. So they put it in movies, TV shows, music videos, things of this nature. Sometimes they just come right out and announce what they've got planned for us. They do it in the form of documents, books, in the form of speeches that politicians might make. They just come right out and say what they plan to do. There's been more and more of that in recent times. They've been getting more blatant and more brazen about it. And people just don't seem to notice. They don't seem to care. In the words of George Carlin, they can come right out and say, this is the future we've got planned for you and your family. And most people just won't give a shit because they're not paying attention. Their attention spans have been reduced to about 5 seconds due to social media and stuff on the internet and the plethora of things that are battling for our attention and our consciousness in these times, or they'll just be too cowardly to want to do anything about it, or they'll just feel too hopeless to be able to do anything about it. So they're telling us where they want to take things. But they usually try and trick and coerce us into agreeing to these things by dressing them up as something that they're not. So they'll tell you that it's for your own good, your own safety, the safety of those around you, and it's your civic duty to take one of these things, or preferably several of these things. They won't tell you really what the agenda is. Then they'll go on and on about this global climate warming change bollocks, as the sheep farm lads would say. And they'll say, oh, you need to modify your lifestyle and travel less and rack up these carbon neutral points and offset your carbon emissions and all this sort of stuff because it's to protect the planet. Don't you know? That's why we're doing it. Because we care. Not because we're psychopaths. Not because we want to control and subjugate everyone. No, we care about all living things and the planet itself, they will say. They won't tell you that it's part of some much wider agenda tying into the New World Order Master Plan, Agenda 2030, the smart grid, Internet of Things, futuristic 5G, transhumanist nightmare. They won't come out and tell you that. They have to do everything by trickery and by coercion and deception. So therefore, they're not really gaining your consent, are they? If they're not being completely upfront about what they plan to do. And I feel it would have been that way when we were tricked and coerced through whatever methods were used into incarnating into this place. We must have been conned and mugged off in some way to have found ourselves here. Many describe us as original divine sparks who have somehow found ourselves in this bastardized CGI, fake virtual reality simulation world, which for some reason we are inhabiting. But I would argue that it must have been achieved through deception and duplicity. So the advice that I gave earlier is the best advice that I feel can be given to anyone in these times, if we're going to try and make any sense of these lives. And I feel that with every passing video, I'm making more and more sense of this reality in which we all find ourselves. The old answers that used to get given to me just don't cut it anymore. The new answers that I'm coming across, and I intend to have many more conversations of this nature in the months ahead, are making a whole lot more sense of this crazy, fucked up world, which I like to describe as a Monty Python sketch gone live, because that's how ridiculous and absurd it truly is. None of these movies get put out there by accident. There's a reason for all of these different narratives, because they're telling us something that we need to comprehend about where we really are and what we really are. Somebody else has written in, question, what is the point? Answer, there is none. If you don't care, it doesn't matter. It's not nihilism. Hence absolute freedom, and I think only the Buddha, if he existed, worked this out when he stated the only possible conclusion is to avoid suffering. He said, don't look for God or the causation or what the ultimate answers lie. This is a fool's errand. The I don't give a shit means I literally didn't ask to be here. It's shite. People are wankers. So fuck it. I will be me and have absolutely no interest in what other people say or do. Not in a psychopathic way, but in a leave me alone sort of way. The fact that life is so pointless means it's so liberating. Fuck it. I really am happy because people are scum and not worth trying to impress. Works for me, honestly. So that's what this guy said, making the point that ultimately trying to find any kind of meaning in these lives is pointless, is an exercise in futility because we've been trapped and tricked and coerced into being here, and we just have to make the best of it. I would only add to what he had to say there that to reinforce my earlier point, we must do all we can to try and help others and try and make this world a better place, recognizing that we're never going to fix it totally, but we can leave it in a better condition than it would have been in if we'd never incarnated into it. If there is meaning in these lives, that I think is where it lies. And I responded to that comment by saying, I can get with some of that. All I've ever wanted is to be left the fuck alone. If everyone would leave me alone to do what I want, I'll do no harm to no other living sentient being. Not intentionally, anyway. I'm at my very happiest when I'm by myself out in nature. But we're never left alone to live like that, are we? And there's the problem. They don't leave us alone. They keep pushing and prodding and poking at us to try and generate a reaction. Birds of prey. How wonderful they are to watch defying gravity, but what are they actually doing? They're looking for unsuspecting mammals to kill from above, inserting their death-shaped claws into fleshy bodies, tearing through the rectum or the eye or the lung as they do so, ripping them from their family before eating them alive. Again, why? At least maggots eat dead flesh. And the answer to rats is not to feed birds of prey. So as anyone who's seen my previous videos will know, this is one of my major contentions. If this place were the creation of a loving, benevolent God, why is it necessary for living, sentient creatures to have to rip each other apart in painful, horrific, fearful ways every single day just in order to survive? What does it say about any kind of entity, any kind of consciousness that would have created a reality in which that is necessary when there are so many different ways in which this realm could have been constructed? It never had to be that way. It could have been so different. The fact that it is that way means that it was set up that way deliberately. This video will have offended those of various religious constitutions. It will have pissed people off. It will have disappointed people. Whatever the case, I really don't care. I'm saying exactly what I want to say on these platforms, which are my platforms, where I'm free to express myself in any way that I choose. I know that these messages are resonating with a whole load of people because I get a lot of positive feedback and people telling me that they're finding a lot of value in these messages. So for anyone for whom these messages are not resonating, you do, of course, always have the choice to jog on to a channel and a speaker who is going to be more in keeping with your way of viewing the world. If you don't like what I'm doing, don't watch my videos. Don't come to my channel. I'm not interested in reading comments from people who are going to challenge the points that I'm putting across. Not interested in that. I've heard it a million times already. You would be best served going along to some broadcaster who fits your viewpoint far more so than I do. Or, better yet, how about you start your own channel? For everyone else who has been finding value in these videos, I hope that you'll continue to do so. I do intend to have many more conversations of this nature. Got some interesting guests lined up for the months ahead, and this is a subject area which I intend to continue pursuing now on these regular video updates. How does that explain why evildoers, those who spend their entire lives screwing other people over, defrauding them, stealing from them in different ways, lying to them, deceiving them, in many cases physically assaulting them, raping them, and murdering them, literally get away with murder? Never seem to answer for their crimes, as far as we can see. And yet, good people who try to blow the whistle on the evil and the darkness that goes on often end up paying the ultimate price for it. How many whistleblowers, how many insiders have been gotten rid of in various different ways just for trying to do the right thing and trying to put empowering truth into the world that's going to help other people and stop evil from advancing? So this calls into question the true nature of the entity or the force that we call God. So for all these years, I've been under the impression, I've preferred to assume, that God, the source, the One, the Divine, is effectively a good, loving, benevolent being. That the default spiritual state for God and for us to aspire to be like God, is goodness, love, light, not evil, darkness, death, destruction, lies, deception. What if God, whatever created this realm in which we find ourselves, we don't really know what we're doing here. We can give it our best guess. We can look at other traditions and other belief systems that have come before us and try to piece it all together. But because of this mind wipe that we undergo when we start these new lives, we never know for sure what we're doing here, how we're supposed to behave, and where we're headed when it's all done. We can't know that for sure. We're not allowed the privilege of that information. So what if God is not a good, benevolent being that wants the best for us? What if God is actually some sort of demon? What if God is a deeply malevolent entity which delights in suffering and hardship and misery? Isn't this the perfect place for that kind of God to reap all the negative, fear-based, louche energy that is generated by so many millions, if not billions of people undergoing great hardship in their lives? What if this entity or group of entities feed off of that kind of energy, and this place is actually a farm to generate it in huge quantities? That makes sense of a lot for me now, looking at how much suffering and pain and death there is in the world, and not just now. It's been this way for as long as anyone knows. Any period in history you might care to study, you will find these same dynamics at play. Always wars, always conflict, always death, always suffering, always poverty, always turmoil, chaos. We're not aware of any point in human history where there's been peace and calm and love, but there's plenty of the other. We're taught that we reap appropriate consequences as a result of those thoughts, behaviors, and actions, that through our free will, our greatest gift, endowed to us by this God, this force, we get appropriate payback. That's the concept of karma. But if we're going to be honest about it, and if you really look at it and really think about it, it doesn't seem to work that way, does it? We can see psychopaths, sociopaths, narcissists, murderers, rapists, thieves getting away with those crimes, those kind of behaviors, those kind of transgressions against natural law all the time. Meanwhile, we can see people who are trying to stop that kind of behavior from being in place and trying to expose it and trying to offer positive alternatives that are going to help and uplift all of humanity out of a genuine concern coming from a place of conscience towards others. And what happens to them? They suffer. They undergo misery, torment, hardship, and in many cases, ultimately, they pay with their lives for what they've tried to do. That's another dynamic that we've seen throughout human history. You even see it in traditional Christian teachings through the figure of Jesus. Jesus, we're told, was a good man. He was more than that. He was God personified. But what happened? He was tortured and murdered. That's what he got in exchange for his good efforts, his good deeds, doing the right thing. What kind of God would set up a place where those are the governing dynamics? What if God made most of us with a conscience in place, with a natural gravitation towards wanting to do the right thing, towards right action in any given situation, towards wanting to help others, wanting to help nature, animals, other living beings, wanting this place to be what it could, based in harmony and love and peace? Isn't that what we all want, or say that we want? So what if this God is some sick, demented maniac? Many would be horrified to hear me say that, so I'll get to that in due course. But just suppose for a moment that is the true nature of God. But this demiurge has created a bad copy of it, in which evil and death and destruction runs amok, and evildoers get away with it. And those people who try to be good and try to do the right thing can't do right for doing wrong. The more you try, the more you suffer. The better you try to be, the more hardship you reap. Because that seems to be a pretty accurate equation. The more good you try and do, the more shit you'll get thrown your way. That's been my personal experience in my own life, and that's been the experience of many people that I speak to about this. Many friends, many good people, of living sentient beings are brutally murdered every day as part of the food chain through, for some reason, living creatures having to slaughter other living creatures just to be able to survive, rather than a dynamic where all creatures, all living sentient beings, would eat plants and other non-sentient organisms. Not interested in getting into a debate here about whether plants have feelings in the same way that animals do. That's something for another time, not going into it. I'm just asking, why is it necessary to have a world full of that kind of brutality? reality in the so-called natural world. That's why psychopaths thrive and prosper, and good people, people doing their very best to live good lives, only reap suffering and misery as a result. See, I hear about consequentialism. I used to buy into all of that, the concept of karma, good deeds reap good rewards, but it's not actually accurate, is it? We don't see that. Good deeds reap hassle, stress, and bullshit. That's a more accurate way of summing it up. Whereas evil deeds, deeds which go against natural law, that transgress against other people's rights, get rewarded with wealth, riches, prominence, success, in terms of the way it's measured in this world. Quite a few people are coming around to this way of thinking now, in these times. Is that down to some sort of vibrational shift? I want to hear some new ideas. I don't want to hear platitudes like, our souls are here to grow and evolve, and everything that happens for a reason, and it's to enrich us and help us to grow and learn lessons and bring our consciousness back to source when we leave here. Yeah, I've heard those explanations. I've been listening to them from many different speakers, many different scholars for the best part of 15, 20 years. I'm after some fresh perspectives. I also don't want to hear dogmatic, orthodox, religious doctrines. I don't want to hear about how Jesus loves me and is always there for me. I don't want to hear about Buddha or Krishna or Muhammad or any of these conventional religious figures. I don't want to hear that we're being tested, because what's the point? What's the point of, if reincarnation is real, for example, which many of these Eastern religions will tell us is the case, what is the point of undergoing multiple lives if every time you come in, you have a mind wipe and you start with a blank sheet of paper? You don't remember where you've come from. You don't remember what you did in previous lives. We don't have any memories of lessons that we previously learned. So what's the point? You know, you could get 99% of the way that we're told we need to go in terms of spiritual knowledge, but you're just missing that one crucial percent to achieve enlightenment, to earn your ticket out of this endless reincarnation loop that we're told about. And you get plunged all the way back to the bottom, like a game of snakes and ladders. Down the snake you go, all the way back to the bottom, and you have to do it all over again. And that 99% of knowledge that you accumulated stands for nothing. You might as well not have bothered, because now you're starting all over again. Here's another metaphor. Imagine a group of climbers trying to climb Mount Everest, and some of them get a third of the way up and then they can't go on. Some of them get 3/4 of the way up and then they can't go on, and a couple of them get within 3 steps of reaching the summit, and then for whatever reason they lose their foothold and they tumble back down right to the base of the mountain and have to start all over again, along with the people that only got halfway up and a third of the way up, and all of them have to do it all over again. That's the metaphor here. What's the point of that? Where is there any kind of value? Where is there any kind of justice? How is that just? How is that fair? What kind of loving, benevolent God would put us through the anguish and the torture and the trauma that we all experience? Because that's one thing that unites pretty much everybody. We all go through some sort of trauma. Trauma is the key to harnessing all this fear-based loose energy. And it takes a lot to transcend that trauma for many people. We spend our lives coming to terms with it and having to find coping mechanisms for what we've been put through. Where's the value in that? Is Earth a school or a prison? Great question on what God is, what this realm is, and what these lives really are. Is Earth a school or a prison? Well, to me, it feels like a torture chamber. That's what it feels like. Getting offended is a choice. If people get offended at the content, that's down to them. It's down to anyone what they make of what I put out in these videos. But I've got to say, the vast bulk of people that have been getting offended and letting me know about it identify as Christians. It's interesting because I've had no pissed off Buddhists, I've had no pissed off Hindus, no pissed off Jews, no pissed off Muslims. I've not even had any pissed off atheists saying your view of theology is flawed and skewed and is wrong. Only Christians. And what has been the standard response of these Christians? Have they sought to reach out a hand of fellowship and friendship to a brother in need? No. Their response has been to make response videos about me and stick them up on YouTube. So dear old Marty Bucko came back. He confirmed that he really does believe there was a man named Jonah who got swallowed up by a whale and lived in his belly for 3 days because a book tells him so. A book which David Icke is fond of describing as having been written who knows when, by who knows who knows where, in who knows what circumstances. But Marty takes it literally and will not accept that the Bible is allegorical. So, there's not much more I can say about that situation. Nigel Watson couldn't let it rest either. He came back for another go. And also there was a dude named Wyvern the Terrible. And he's so terrible that he doesn't use his own name with his videos. So, big man hiding behind a pseudonym. They're going through. No, the standard response is to get upset, give a knee-jerk reaction, and put a video out. Apparently that's what Jesus would do. And lo, Jesus did saith unto them, If thou should findeth a brother in need, do not helpeth thy brother, but say unto him, fucketh thou. Something like that. People will get very upset about that. It is what it is. It's going to be what it's going to be. Why is there a direct correlation between the amount of good work that you try and do in the world, standing in right action, doing what you know to be right, aligning yourself with the rest of humanity and creation, doing no harm, seeking to help others, and the amount of suffering, hardship, and general shit that gets thrown your way as a result? So in other words, the harder you try to do good, the more crap you reap. The other question is, why is the natural world, the food chain, so utterly horrific and barbaric, whereby billions of living sentient beings are forced to go through pain, torment, trauma, and agonizing deaths just to feed other species every single day all over the world? Why could a loving God, if that's what we have, not have created a realm where that kind of scenario is not necessary? Why could there not have been a better system put into place? If this world is all about love, if God is good and cares about us. Again, it's all just questions. Everyone wants to insist that they've got the answer. They know what's going on. Their way is the right way. And if you don't agree with them, you're just plain wrong. We're deliberately left without answers, as that video just pointed out. We're on a ship and we don't know how we got there or where we're going. It's a great analogy. We're all trying to find the answers together. We can support each other, we can assist each other, we can share information with each other, and that's the way it should be. No good deed goes unpunished. Just think about that. That ties into my earlier contention that the more good you try and put into the world, the more suffering you reap as a result. No good deed goes unpunished. So what kind of realm are we in? What kind of God, what kind of force presides over a world where those dynamics are in place? Somebody simply wrote in, the Ouija board saying God and Satan are the same sounds like it could be talking about the Old and New Testaments. Well, certainly the God of the different sections of the Bible appears to be a completely different entity. I think few would disagree with that. The God of the Old Testament is jealous, is psychopathic, is narcissistic, and displays all the traits that we're told we shouldn't. So God in the Old Testament is what we're encouraged not to be, or ordered not to be. So how does that work then? And then by the New Testament, he's become so loving after dishing out all the plagues and the pestilence and all the punishments and wiping out almost all of humanity except Noah on his boat. In the New Testament, he suddenly loves us so much that he incarnates in physical human form and allows himself to be tortured and die on our behalf. What the New Testament is really all about is astrotheology, with Jesus representing the sun on its journey through the skies and through the zodiac. It's all encoded in the Bible. That's what it is, an astrotheological allegory. Just pissed off a whole bunch of Christians again, no doubt. But just making the point that God has completely transformed personality from the Old Testament to the New. And yet we're asked to believe that it's the same entity throughout and just trust it. Just trust the book. Trust what's written on a few pages in some book that just appeared somewhere, somehow. You know, it's all real. The devil gets blamed for everything, but it's God who allows the devil to act as he was scripted to do, if it was all laid out as a divine plan. People come to God through fear, not love, as he obviously isn't a loving God. He's a totalitarian bully who coerces people into compliance through destroying and removing what is meaningful to them, i.e. love, wealth, health, etc., rendering them helpless, desperate, and lost. The Bible says, don't invest in worldly things, just love and adore God. But where's the sense in constantly being punished for wanting money, love, connection, meaning, and purpose through the realm of experience that he has so-called created for us? But to me, he's to blame for the world being as it is. Someone simply writes, there is no growth in a continuation of amnesic cycles. If you're a spark of the Godhead, you will have already learnt everything imaginable countless times. So in other words, there's no reason to keep reincarnating and coming back over and over and over again with a mind wipe every time, so you forget what you've learnt and you have to go through the whole thing all over again. Somebody else has written, where do I sign so that I never have to come back to Earth ever again? Is that emphatic enough? This life has broken me. I try to be good, but it doesn't pay. I see psychopaths getting everything they want and wonder, does good really pay? It doesn't, does it? I have a son with autism and learning difficulties and who has now become a binge-drinking alcoholic brought on over the last 4 years. I don't recall saying yes to any of this. It's hell. How is this helping me to become a better person if my brain is mashed with stress and stress-related memory loss? All I can do is make it from one day to the next. That's not spiritual progress, is it?